you know, pi times diameter, basic math. Of course, I'm wearing gloves right now because the seam sealer is still sticky. You grab your hinge. It's not enough. Hello everyone, welcome back to Maverick Mods. Working on the Firebird this week. Really wish I could say the interior was done. It is getting closer. Most of the focus this week is working on the dash, working under the dash, HVAC ducting, wiring, things like that. Got tired of that, decided, you know what, time to put the doors on. So, grab your popcorn, let's get started. Howdy folks. We're inside the Firebird again, working on the ducting. That's all going to be behind the dash. Originally, the way the Z28 setup was, you had the HVAC unit which bolted to the dash. You had the dash which bolted to the firewall or the interior structure, and then you had some plastic ducting that was sandwiched in between. They were never really solidly mounted to begin with. It was all kind of a sandwich type of deal. All I really need, and the way this unit works, you've got well, normal settings. You've got heat, which footwell heat's going to come out from these ducts down here. That comes from here. You've got heat that can come from the dash vents, and that comes from here. Conversely, air conditioning, same deal. Air conditioning can come out of the bottom vents, it can come out of here, but this is the main vent apparatus here that will send air to the dash vents. This is all defrosting ducts. The one up here was for side window defrosting only, which I cannot incorporate. I'm not going to incorporate that. I can either block that off or I can incorporate that into a setup here that ties in with the main defroster. They're both basically the same setup. Now, as far as what I do from here, the sandwiched ducts, so here's the one for the defroster. Obviously, it was designed for one defroster vent up here, which I'm not going to incorporate. I can't incorporate because it interferes with the windshield mounting. I've mounted my Firebird defroster ducts and I've trimmed them to where everything will fit for the defroster. So what I'm going to do here is, well, let's take the pieces of the original ducting that parts of it I can actually use. So this is the duct that goes to the dash vents, and it's still not trimmed enough to fit completely, but what I'm going to wind up doing, these are the only two that I need to work with. So I think what I'm going to do, let's start with the defroster because that's going to tuck up the closest. And I think what I can do with this is I can trim that, get it a little bit closer, get rid of this little lip here, get it a little bit closer, and then I'm just going to slice it essentially at about an angle like this, all the way across. That'll leave me an opening, but then I can just cover that with a piece of plastic and have round ducting, and I'll show you the ducting. This here is the ducting. This is just flexible plastic defroster ducting straight from the auto parts store. It's 3-inch diameter, and what I'll do is I'll take and I'll put two openings after I make the cut here and block it off. I'll make two openings that I'll just then have the ducts, and they'll go from essentially here and they'll tie into my original 71 Firebird defroster ducts that come up out of the dash. So one here and one here. That'll take care of the defroster. As far as the dash vents, I think what I'll wind up doing, similar theme. This was the opening that went to the central vents. Can't use that because it interferes with too much up here. But I think what I can do is I can basically, again, take this opening, thin it down so that it fits a little bit more flush, trim it here, and basically trim it probably at an angle about like this. That way I can have my ducts coming, if it's cut like that, I can have my ducts coming out here to my central vents, and on each side I can just put a 3-inch vent that'll go to the side vents. I think that's the simplest way to deal with that. So let me get some of these cut and let's see what it looks like. Preliminary cuts done on the duct. Not nearly as much left of them as when I started, but here's the defroster. It slips right over this opening. Remember, I'm going to cover that opening. And just for giggles, here is the dash vent duct. It's going to slip right there. Okay. Now, just when I look at this from an initial standpoint, my only idea that is not going to work is I wanted to come off of this side of this piece of ducting with a essentially a hose that would go to the dash vent on the driver's side, and then I'd have one that came out here on that side and one on the top that went here. And the problem I'm going to run across is I'm not going to have very much room to put a duct here or here because of the defroster. So, you know, I'm going to cross that bridge when I get to it. I have an idea, and it's going to mean sacrificing a lot of this, I think. But I have an idea. But first, I think it's going to be easier to go ahead and just mount the finish the defroster duct, get it mounted, and get the hoses in. And basically, like I said, the hoses are these guys. So one of them is going to sit here, one of them is going to sit there, and so this one just comes right up to here to this defroster duct. This one, same drill, is going to start here. It's going to have to come make a little bit more of a round trip, or a little bit more of a trip to go about right there to clear everything here. But that's where that's going to go. And I'm going to go ahead and get this one in first, and then I can work around this. I got my defroster duct fabricated. Originally I was going to make this out of plastic and just plastic weld the edges. Turns out that was going to be more trouble and more work than it was worth. So I just folded up a little sheet metal cover, glued it, and pop riveted it to the original plastic piece here. Also made a cover that will leave this opening here for the actual defroster, but also cover this, which used to be for the side window defrosting. So it's going to fit right here, and I'll get this lined up. Now I need to put a sealer between my actual duct and the HVAC box itself. Let me get a sealer in there, and then we'll get this. I'm just going to use self-tappers and screw it in place. I'm going to put one right in the center here, if I can do this without dropping it down the duct. Yeah, see, like that. My magnet, retrieve the screw I dropped. Well, I can't find my magnetic tip, so worst case scenario, what you can do is take your RTV, which I'm almost out of, dab a little bit on the tip, on the head of your bolt, head of your screw, whatever, and hopefully that'll hold it long enough for me to get it where I need it to go. There we go. All right, that's not going anywhere. I've got my first little piece of ducting attached. All I've got to do now is, hopefully this works, slip it over the opening there, work it down like so, make sure I've got it down as far as it'll go. Done. Take a tie wrap. Alright. We'll just snug that up a little bit more. we go. That ought to hold. Cut our tie wrap and done. Okay, so this one's in. I'll hook this one up to this side, and nice thing about this is it's flexible enough I can actually, if I need to, I've got plenty of room to kind of squish that as necessary for anything that needs to fit in here, aka wiring harness, part of the dash, whatever it takes. So let me get that one in, and then we'll work on the vents for the dash themselves. If anybody's wondering how I'm actually making these the ducts. The 3-inch flexible ducting just comes from the auto parts store. The actual interface for the duct, here's the one for the dash vents. So I started off with the original plastic part, cut that where I needed it to be. Then I made, this one's actually in 3-piece, the other one was 1-piece. I made a center kind of, what do you call that, a roof pyramid, peak's not a pyramid. Cut and bent that to shape. Then I made the bottom, then I made the top, and to make the rings, I just, you know, pi times diameter, basic math. So I need a 3-inch ring, so I cut a 9.42 inch by 1 piece of sheet metal, bent it into a ring, and then I just tacked these rings to the sheet metal openings. And right now it's covered in seam sealer both inside and out at the edges to keep it from, well, keep it from leaking. So of course I'm wearing gloves right now because the seam sealer is still sticky, but I need to paint this so that it looks presentable, and then I can install it. Okay, so I've got the dash vent duct in, bolted in. All I've got to do now is, I actually have to put the dash in next, or actually mount the wiring harness, put the dash in, because my passenger duct is going to come off of here, my driver's side air duct come off of here, and the central duct's going to come off of here, and I need to have all those kind of in place before I actually run the ducts and get the right lengths. Once I get the right lengths, I think I can permanently mount the ducts. So we'll see. It's kind of chicken and the egg thing here. I've got a, well, it's a big bowl of spaghetti here. Don't panic. I know what I'm dealing with here. Finalizing the wiring harness now that I've got the ducting for the HVAC in. And what we're dealing with here, first thing I had to put in was the door harness, and that's actually a separate harness. This is actually running up, kind of up top there, and that runs from door to door and connects to the main harness right here at the junction. That's power windows, power door locks, power mirrors, power this, power that, you name it, that's all in the doors. The rest of this harness it's not as complicated as it looks, and it kind of falls into place. So I've got fuse box, which I will have to relocate. Here's the main junction that connects the body harness to the firewall harness. A couple of grounds, no big deal there. So down here I've got headlight switch right here. This is going to connect, I believe, steering column. I've got another column harness here. Over there is wiring that's going to go to the center stack for radio, HVAC, all that kind of stuff. Over on the other side, I've got the body control module. Everything's hooked up over there. HVAC is hooked up, body control module is hooked up, door harness running back to the back of the car. That's all hooked up. All I've got to do is just get the dash in to finalize its position. I did have to put in a new airbag module because the airbags popped on the Z28, and once you do that, you got to replace the module. So I've got a good module, hopefully, fingers crossed. I'm to the point now where I need to test fit the dash to figure out exactly where the harness attach points need to go. So I'm going to do that next. Update number, what are we on? 1, 2, 1? I don't know. Interior dash installed. So where I left off last, I was just sorting the last of the wiring harness in preparation for getting the dash in. The dash has been in and out probably 3 times or so, just figuring out where everything goes. Got that pretty well set. And then the dash had to come back out because I remembered too late that the center console has to go in before the dash. So the dash came out, center console went in, dash went back in. Where I'm at now is the wires that are hanging down are all attached to the steering column. So that's next. Steering column is going to go in, and the only thing I'm running across so far, if you notice over on the other side, I've got some ducting that still needs to be run, and the only thing I'm running across is right up in here. I've got a dash vent that I don't have a whole heck of a lot of room in there to run a duct, and I might have to get a little creative to kind of snake it around there. I'll sort that out, but for now, the steering column's got to go in. I can kind of pre-position the column, but I also have to line it up with my steering shaft, so I can't go all the way in to start with. I get a couple of nuts up here I need to take off. I'm pretty sure everything is kind of out of the way, hopefully. So I'll kind of snake it up around the wires, around the brake pedal, into the hole. Now I need to leave it kind of right there for a second. All right, so I got a third hand to help me get this lined up. Let's see if we can get this in. Okay.
It's in.
Okay.
Go the bolt.
There we go. I got to get these nuts in first to hold this up. And what did I do with the nuts? There's one, there's two. Okay. There we go. All right. All right, now I've got 3 bolts to hold the column to the firewall, 2 nuts to cinch this thing up. Let me get that done, and then maybe we can do a little close-up on actually hooking this thing up. Well, I'm jumping the gun a little bit by putting the seats in, but you know what? Sometimes you just gotta kind of try things out, test things out, and sit in the project. Kind of keep your mojo going. Power seats hooked up. Believe it or not, this is the first time I've ever sat in this car with essentially the entire interior installed at the same time. Everything's tight, everything seems to work. It's not complete yet. Let's take a look at how far I made it. This vent is the one I've got to get the light switch hooked up, but this vent is the one I've got to find room for the ducting and stuff. So that's just kind of in there for now. Dash itself, pretty stout. I do need to kind of tie it a little bit better in the center to the existing dash structure of the Firebird. Other than that, everything's in, it's tight. I mean, it feels good. Still got to work on the passenger side. You notice the duct for that vent is just kind of laying there. I just need to run that over, but I need to get the rest of the wiring harness mounted up. Plus I need to get the center stack in place, set, get the center duct in. But let's see, what else do I have to do? Kick panels, I just need to finish trimming those, paint them. I'm not going to cover them with a fabric, I'm just going to paint those. Other than that, I am absolutely burned out on interiors. So I'm going to take a break from the interior, and we're going to work on the doors, because the next up is to get the doors finished, edged out, and back on the car. A couple of days ago, I went ahead and started and finished edging the doors, and basically all that is, you're going to wear your fingers out, sanding all the little nooks and crannies. I do a combination of usually 240 grit to 320 grit depending, and Scotch-Brite, the red Scotch-Brite pad. Seems to work really well with this. So the doors are edged out. Before I can put them on though, I need to work on the hinges. So let's take a look at the hinges. Let's turn our attention to hinges for a little while. I know there's lots of videos out there, probably by guys that are smarter than me, about how to redo the hinges. But it doesn't matter, I still have to do something with them. And what I've got here is I need to do several things. One, I've got them sandblasted, but they need to go back through the sandblast cabinet. So I've sort of got them cleaned up. I need to paint them, and then I need to fix the hinges and the hinge pins. Pretty common. I mean, well, the doors on this car are probably about 100 pounds when they're all tarted up and got all the goodies inside of them. And the hinges take some abuse. And after a while, you know, I mean, your doors start sagging, and sometimes that's misalignment. Sometimes it's the hinges are worn out, and the hinge pins are worn out, and the hinge bushings are worn out. I'll show you what I mean. So here is this is the lower hinge for the passenger side. Like I said, I've got them, I ran it through the sandblast cabinet a while back. They rusted a little bit, so I'll have to run them back through, but that's okay. This is the part that bolts to the body. This is the part that bolts to the door. Of course, it just creates a pivot. We got a lower hinge and an upper hinge. It pivots on this pin right here. Yeah, that's the right one. And this pin has got bushings where it goes through the actual metal. That's to keep from, the bushings are basically sacrificial. And what happens over time is two things, and I've got both things going on here. One, the bushings can start wearing out, and two, the pins might start wearing out. And so in this case, I've got, kind of hard to tell on this one, the other one might be a little bit better. I don't know if you can actually hear that. It's kind of clicking a little bit. But, so what I've got here is I've got bushing wear on both of these, just enough that I've got some play. It's not bad, but I've got some play in the lowers. On the uppers, it's a little bit worse. I got two things going on here. So if you can see this, on this bushing right here, the bushing itself is actually loose inside of the hinge itself, which means I'm gonna have to find an oversized or a knurled bushing to fit back in this. And same thing, I think the bottom one is the same way. There's a lot of play in the upper hinge, which is normal because that's where the largest weight of the door concentrates. So I have to do a little bit on that, but I've got some pin wear and I've got some bushing wear. So what I got going on here, got the whichever one this is. I think this is the upper side for the upper hinge for the passenger side. Got it chucked up in a vise, and I need to drive this pin out, and it's going to be like an interference fit on the bottom part of this hinge. And if these bushings weren't worn out, then it would be a fairly tight fit to get out of the bushings. So the factory a lot of times will like put a little tang on the side of the pin itself after they put them together. I went ahead and ground that off. So in theory, I should be able to drive this out. Hey, it went out easier than I thought. Okay. That kind of tells me that it's a little bit more worn out than I was kind of hoping for. All right. So what we got here is, this is our pin. There's a knurled area right here at the very end. That's what goes in the bottom portion of the hinge. Then where the shiny part is, this is the part that rides on the bushing itself. So I'm going to get my micrometers out and kind of mic these. This one here, I can already feel a lot of wear right in there. So I'm probably going to go ahead and replace this pin for sure. All right, so there's one part of the hinge. Now these bushings, this one is so worn out that it's loose inside of the housing. So let's take a look at that. This bushing is so worn out, it's loose inside the housing. I mean, I can move that by hand, and that should be a press fit interference fit. So this one is going to need a knurled oversized bushing to go back in this housing. This one is tight, but they're going to get replaced anyway. In the end, these are the old pins. Every one of them is showing just enough wear that it's time for new pins. So the good news is there are repair kits for this. These are from Dorman. I've used them before. They work really well. What comes in the box, this is a 1 pin and 4 bushings. So what they give you is, of course, this is a new pin. It's got the knurled end that goes in one side of the hinge, kind of in that little hole right there, and goes through. And then what you get is you get 4 bushings. Now you only need 2 per pin, but the reason you get 4 is, for example, this, I'll show you a good one. All right, so this is a relatively good hinge bracket, hinge side, and I've got one side that is, I know it's upside down, 0.48-ish, something like that, 0.47. The other one is 0.41, 0.3, point something, 0.41. If you take a 0.41 bushing and stick it in there, I can push this in by hand. And you shouldn't be able to do that. That should be a press fit, should be a forced in fit, which means that this one is worn out, it's kind of wallered out, and that's just from the hinge wearing, the bushing, the old bushing wearing, and then the bushing starting moving around in the housing itself. That's why they give you 4 bushings, because you've got a normal size one, and then the other bigger one would normally be this, that's the knurled one. But they give you another normal bushing and then another knurled bushing in case you need to repair a bad hole, which in this case I do. All right, so why don't we do this? Let's concentrate on one hinge, because there's just a whole bunch of parts and pieces here. So I've got a couple of questions that need to be answered. Well, first off, let's start off with something unusual. I've never seen this before. I'm sure it's happened, I've never seen it before. I got this hinge cleaned up. This is the door side upper for the driver's side on the mounts to the door. It's got a crack in it, right there. It goes all the way through to that side. I've never seen a door hinge crack like that before. So, but it's repairable. I can go ahead and fix this. I'll just weld up the crack. Life is good. So, but here's a question. Do I reassemble the hinges and then paint them, or do I paint them separately and then reassemble? And we're kind of chicken and the egg deal. What happens if you reassemble them and then paint them is this. Let's see if I can remember how to put this together. I think it goes that way. Nope, it goes that way. Is that right? Yep, I think it's that way. Okay. So, of course, I don't have any bushings in this right now. If I reassemble this and then paint it, then what's going to happen is, no matter where that hinge sits, if I paint it that way, then this area here is not going to get paint on it. If I do it this way, then there's going to be areas down here that don't get paint on them. And the same way over on this side, especially on this one, because it's got the door check on this side. So if I reassemble these completely and then paint them, somewhere along the way, an area of this hinge is not going to get paint on it. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fix this crack first. Once I do that and get it all cleaned up, I'm going to paint these separately. But I'm going to put the bushings in first. Of course, I'll protect the center of the bushing so it doesn't get paint in it. And then I'll reassemble them after they're painted. That way, there's no spot anywhere on this hinge that doesn't get paint. So when you open the door, you can always know that there's not going to be a bare spot sitting there, that a part of this that has no paint on it. So let me go ahead and get the rest of these cleaned up. We'll get the bushings put in these parts. I'll fix this one, and then they'll be ready for paint. All right, so I got back from the press. I've got my hinges, I've got my, what are these things called? Bushings. Got my bushings pressed in. Again, you don't need a press to do it. You can just hammer them in. I just use the press because I have one. And so when these things go back together, basically, they're gonna go back in just like this. Wiggle it a little bit. You shouldn't have a tight fit, but it should be, I don't know, I guess you could call it mildly snug. And this is just for test fit purposes. There we go. All right, now my pin goes in from this way. Now I'm not putting them together now, I'm just kind of test fitting everything. So a pin's gonna go in there, gonna line up there, come out the bottom, and then I'll go and hammer when the time comes and everything is painted and they go back for assembly. I'll just hammer the pin in right there. I'll probably try and strike the end of the pin on this side, just like the factory did. That should help hold it in. But even now, that hinge is, oh, it's so much better, so much tighter, and so much smoother than it was before I did all of this. And that's why we do it. Here are the hinges. They have a couple of coats of epoxy primer on them. Gonna get color on them here very shortly. Figured I'd go ahead and do these now. Like I said, as you saw before, I've got the doors edged out. Get the hinges done, get those reassembled and back on the doors and get those aligned. Then the doors can go back on the car. Figured while I'm at it, may as well edge the fenders out as well. I've just got some protective layer in here because the insides of the fender are actually hot rod black. Basically, there's a few little tiny areas that you can just barely see inside the engine compartment. So I went ahead and hit those. Most of it you'll never be able to see, but I will. So I've got everything taped off, and I'll get the portions of the edges of the fenders that will show in my Borealis blue. And so I'm gonna get this stuff painted and we'll take a look at it when I've got it done. Hinges are out of the paint booth. I've got them organized. Driver upper, driver lower, passenger lower, passenger upper. And the only reason that, basically, I think the lowers are interchangeable. I'm pretty sure that the uppers are different because of the door checks. So obviously, one of the things, while we're talking door checks, I didn't address this the other day because it doesn't apply here. Sometimes your little wheel here on your door check, if that little, I don't know if it's a bushing or a bearing or whatever's in there, if that's worn out and it's really wobbly, this one's not bad. But if it's really wobbly and you got a lot of play in there, you can actually get a lot of kind of popping and creaking and groaning as you open and close the door. I didn't replace these because they were still in good shape. So we'll take a kind of a gander at that when I get the hinges back together. Hopefully I can get this kind of done and you can see what I'm doing here. Let's start off with the, this would be the driver upper. So what I need to do is, before I go too all fired crazy, I need to put some grease, kind of lube up the bushings themselves. So what I did there is I put a little bit of grease in the bushing itself, a little bit on the faces of the bushings where they're going to ride inside of here. And as I put the pin in, I'll put a little bit of dab of grease on the pin as well as I put that in. So let's make sure I get this lined up properly, like so. If I can figure out how to do this without scratching my fresh paint. There we go. Grab a pen. Put a little dab of grease up here because I'm not going to be able to get to that very easily as the pen slides in. Then I'll put another dab of grease down here at the bottom where it rides on the bushing down here. Get this guy lined up. There we go. Now that should just eventually pop in there. Not quite yet. I probably need to get a hammer. I've got my vise set up so that the pen, in theory, should slide right down in there, and I'll get this lined up here just to kind of try and protect my new paint. So there it is. Just takes a little bit of muscle, a little bit of effort, a little bit of hoping you don't chip the paint. But now what I'll do from here, I do have to fix a spot or two on this. But I'm gonna stake the ends of these when I'm done, just like the factory did. Last thing I need to do before actually installing the hinges back on the doors is I need to put the spring back in the door check. Just flat forgot to film taking it out, but it's real simple. That spring goes right in there. And of course it doesn't fit yet, but there's a tool for that. Looks like this. It's just a spring compressor. I think I got this thing at, I don't know, one of the auto parts stores. Beats me. I've had it forever and ever. All you do is just take and open the jaws up, slide your spring in, and give it a little squeeze. Hopefully that's enough. Grab your hinge. It's not enough. Let's try it now. All right, now I've got the spring in place there. All I need to do is just carefully release the tension. Okay, so it's loose. There we go. So, spring is back in the door check. And I got one more to do, and then the hinges can go back on the doors. We are ready to install some hinges here. Going to start off, this is the passenger door. I've verified with my little marks I made before. This is the passenger upper hinge. It's going to go in just like that. I drilled some alignment holes that go through the hinge and actually all the way into the rear, the striker plate behind. But what I need to do is I need to actually get the bolts in to kind of start aligning the striker plate. Now, in theory, I should be able to stick the drill bits through here. Am I putting these in right? I think I am. Yeah, I am. Okay. This should go all the way through. Now, if I did everything right to begin with, and there's no guarantee of that, this hinge should be lined up right there. Drill bits come out, no problem. Now, that should be the right position for this hinge. Now granted, when I drilled those holes, I had worn out hinges, but that may affect the up and down, but it shouldn't affect the other adjustment areas on the door. But it's going to get me awfully close, if nothing else. Someday, I might be able to afford one of those fancy door hanging holder contraptions. Not today. So we're doing this kind of the old-fashioned way, except I'm by myself today and I need to hang these doors. So, got the engine hoist out. and I got the door strapped up to the engine hoist. That is going to be my third man. This might very well be Keystone Cops level, well, Keystone Cops. I'm going to put this on fast forward, and you're going to watch from start to finish. It might go well, it might not. What I need to do is I need to line the door up, basically the gaps. I don't have the striker in yet, and I don't have the hinge in yet, but I can get the gaps. What I should be able to do is line up with my alignment holes, which same thing on the hinges on the door side. I've got alignment holes here. In theory, if I get everything lined up, that should put the door where it's supposed to go. We're gonna find out. Well, it might have worked. I'll show you here in a minute. I'm going to take the tension off of this door. Okay. All right, we'll check it in a minute, but if you come up in here, I've got the hinges tight, and my drill bits, I made sure that they were, loosen their holes so they were centered as best they could. I mean, of course they're the same size bit, and I've got my hinges tight. I'm going to tighten them again right now just to make sure they are tight. Okay. Pull my pins / drill bits out. All right, I'll get my apparatus off, and let's take a look at how well this door fits. All right, let's take a look. Now remember, I don't have the striker in the back, and I don't have the latch in, but the door is on. My gaps, of course, there's a little bit of extra paint on the side here where I edged it out, but my gaps look right. My gap on the bottom, height-wise, is right. Gap up here, if anything, it doesn't look it, but the door might be just a smidge high. It seems like it's a smidge high, but it doesn't look high up here, and I'm right on my body seam. So, you know what, guys? That worked. I'm not going to pat myself on the back yet. It worked for one. I got another door to hang. We'll see how it works after that. I'm going to get the striker and the latch installed on the driver's side door here, and then I'll move over to the passenger side and see how it goes. Doors are on. They're adjusted. Probably got a few little minor tweaks. I think I need to move the striker a little bit on this one, but it's pretty darn close. Let me open this real quick. That one's good. Of course, now I got to build the doors. And this side, doors on, same procedure. Went pretty well as well. Like I said, again, once I get 50 pounds worth of glass and power window regulators and door panels and everything, I'll probably need to readjust these doors one more time, but for now, it's looking like maybe not quite 2/3 of a Firebird, but pretty close to 2/3 of a Firebird. Well, that's going to do it for this week, guys. Firebird's getting closer. It may not be quite 2/3, maybe a little bit more than 2/3. I don't know, but it's starting to resemble a car again, and it's always good to see. Got most of the interior in, wiring harness plugged in. Still got to work on the top of the dash. Going to focus on that and focus on getting the front end sheet metal on moving forward. Certainly appreciate everybody watching. Big thanks to all you guys for tuning in every week. Please like, share, subscribe, notify. Is there anything else? You guys know the drill. We'll see you next week. Everybody, have a great day.